Bonjour tout le monde, everyone. Well, that's everyone.
On va faire
twice.
tout ça en français. Ça fait 1 an que j'ai déménagé ici et mon français n'est pas parfait, mais je pense que we can do an hour in French now.
Yeah, ditto. Ditto to that. And we have the important job of really closing out the day here. So, Harley, without further ado, we'll jump right into things because I think everybody wants to hear from you. Maybe we'll just start off with the macroeconomic environment. Obviously, we're in a high interest rate environment, high inflation, consumer spending habits are changing, affecting sort of different sectors differently, some positively, some negatively. What's your take on all that? I think you've cited, we're in the greatest time ever. You're an eternal optimist. Tell us a bit more about all of that, please.
I am an eternal optimist, although I do think, though, that 1876, a guy named John Wanamaker creates Wanamaker's department store in Philadelphia. That was the first time in the history of North America that a bunch of retailers were all under one roof. My belief, my hypothesis is that retail has been really pretty boring since then, and in the last 10 years or so, we're finally seeing more innovation. If you actually look and you track retail and stores, like physical stores, it's effectively the same concept as what Wanamaker created in Philadelphia in 1876. Bigger stores, more lights, more cafes, DJ booths, but it's the same concept. Whereas in the last 10 years, you're now seeing, one of the largest chocolate bar companies on the planet right now is Feastables, that was started 3 years ago by a YouTuber. This is not a promotional product. I mean, what Mr. Beast created with Feastables is fundamentally disrupting that entire vertical, which is the chocolate vertical, which has been owned by Hershey's and Lindt for a long time. This did not happen historically. You did see, obviously, celebrities starting brands and selling products, but the scale and the velocity that you were seeing right now is unbelievable. We've never seen that. So that's one reason to be optimistic. The second reason to be optimistic is that if you think about all of your favorite brands, the brands that you really love. I don't just mean like you put on a pair of socks, you don't really care, but the stuff that you love. For me, that's James Purse t-shirts. He makes the best black t-shirts. The relationship that consumers have today with the brands that they love, the affinity is much deeper as well, meaning they will go out of their way to buy from the brands, even if it's slightly more expensive. Third thing I will say is that, this is sort of where Shopify comes in, the cost of failure has trended towards pretty much zero, meaning you can start a business today for $39 on Shopify. If it goes somewhere, you may become the next Gymshark, the next Alo, the next Viore, the next whatever. If it doesn't go anywhere, you can just try something else. And so what has happened is that you have more people trying their hand in entrepreneurship at a clip that's never been seen before. So that's sort of on the supply side. On the demand side, on the consumer side, the big thing that makes me optimistic is that post-pandemic, two things have dramatically changed from consumer buying, like a consumer habit perspective. The first is direct-to-consumer was a bit of a fad. It now feels like it's steady state. It feels like the businesses that are doing the best, they may sell wholesale as well, but fundamentally, their main business is direct-to-consumer, and I don't think it's a fad right now. I think direct-to-consumer is going to be steady state going forward. And the second thing is that consumers are voting with their wallets to buy from brands whose values, mission, product, brand reflects their own. I don't think there's any going back to this idea of commoditization where I just buy a random t-shirt, forget price. I mean, not everyone can afford a James Purse t-shirt, I understand that. But even in terms of buying a less expensive t-shirt, buying from Uniqlo, for example, the people that love Uniqlo will only buy from Uniqlo. And when you combine the supply side of more entrepreneurship happening, more retail happening, and the demand side of more consumers buying from brands they love at this ridiculous clip, there's no possible way, in my view, looking at facts and data, to be anything other than optimistic.
Awesome. And it's clear that Shopify's capitalized on a lot of that. You announced your Q2 results. They were great.
Pretty good, yeah.
Congrats on
Thank
that.
You.
And you talk about the company being sort of the strongest version in its history and building a 100-year-old company. So how has really being intentional and precise in your approach to growth really helped Shopify achieve this success?
This is going to be mind-blowing, but the philosophy is actually very simple. The most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing.
My husband says that all the time, actually.
I know it sounds like a fortune cookie, It's not. That is actually how you build a 100-year company. You continuously subtract more than you add. And sometimes we add things to our product suite that we think are good ideas and later on realize they're not great ideas. One area that many of you might be aware of is Shopify Fulfillment. We got into the shipping and fulfillment business and realized we had no place doing so. We ended up selling off those assets to a company called Flexport. The things that we do today, whether it's e-commerce or point of sale, we have about a $5 billion capital business where we do cash advances to small businesses. Those are things that we are uniquely positioned to do where other companies we don't believe are doing it at the level of quality that we think merchants deserve, so we'll do it ourselves. But in other areas where we just don't feel like, we feel like we don't have to do it ourselves. I'll give you an example, buy now, pay later. Rather than build our own buy now, pay later product, we ended up investing in a company called Affirm. We own I think we're one of the largest shareholders of Affirm. And Shopify buy now, pay later, which is Shop Pay Installments, is actually built on Affirm. Same thing with cross-border. Rather than building our own cross-border checkout, we ended up making an investment in a company called Globally. I think we're one of the largest shareholders of that company as well. And now Shopify Markets is built on the rails of Globally. And the most famous one, of course, is Shopify Payments, which is built on Stripe. So where there are areas of business where we think we can innovate, where there is a 10x opportunity to give a better product that exists across on the planet, we will do so. But when someone is doing something really well, we much prefer to partner with them. That's sort of on the product side. On the company side, we have this sort of philosophy around requalification. And we believe there's this is such a weird thing to mention at a fintech conference, but there's something called, there are these laws of ecology. And I think Law 2 of ecology says that you can quote, I'm sure someone on social media will tell me that I got this wrong, but it's generally this, which is that for a species to survive in any given environment, the species needs to grow faster than the rate of change of that environment itself. So how does that apply to Shopify? On our Q2 earnings, we grew top line about 25% year on year. So let's say Shopify is growing 25%. That means the people that lead Shopify have to grow their capacity by at least 25% to survive, and hopefully much more than that in order to thrive there. And so we've instituted this idea that if you want to stay at Shopify over the long run as a leader, you have to requalify for your job every single year and do so on the basis that Shopify is growing at this unbelievable rate. The last thing I'll say is that I think we've created something really special at Shopify around founders. I know we may talk about founder mode later on, which has sort of become the topic du jour, I think, the last couple of weeks. Fundamentally, Shopify is ran by entrepreneurs. This is a company that builds software and products for entrepreneurs, built by entrepreneurs. If you look across the executive team, you look across the product leaders of Shopify, almost everyone is a founder, an entrepreneur. In some cases, these are companies where we've acquired them, and the founder from that company we acquired is now leading big parts of the business. Right. There is something fundamentally productive and effective when you bring in people who otherwise would be doing their own life's work on their own, but you bring them together and collectively they do their life's work together. That is not a 1 + 1 = 3 calculation. That is a 1 + 1 = 30 or 50 calculation. And across the board at Shopify, we've created a bit of a founder's paradise, and meaning they can come here, they can stay with us long past their earnouts are over, and they can do their life's work with us. And I think those three things together has made us the best version of the company. I've been there for 15 years, the best version I've ever seen.
Awesome. So you've sort of teed up a couple of the other topics, embedded finance and founders mode. But before we go there, you said requalify for your job every year. I'm just curious, what does that look like?
There are, it's a silly example, but one of the things we like to, I believe this, and we tell a lot of our leaders is, whatever job you're doing, whether you're in HR, you're in product design, sales, marketing, whatever that is, you should be able to go to the conference in your industry and give the keynote and blow the minds of the people that are watching, because the way that you are doing your job is not linearly better, it is exponentially completely different. So what does that look like? Well, if you're on the growth team and your job is to get more merchants on Shopify, going to spending more money on AdWords or Facebook or Instagram or any digital ad platform, Everybody's doing that. And that is a bit of a race to whoever has most capital. But finding tricks and hacks and innovative ways to actually grow the business, or in another case, how you do sales, rather than simply going to an industry conference or doing RFPs or, God forbid, having to go golfing with somebody, which is my worst nightmare. How do you do things differently? When you sort of set this lens of, if you can go to your industry conference, the most important conference in your space, and give the keynote and explain how you are doing something more effectively using tools, tricks, and tips that no one else in the crowd is doing, that's how you requalify.
Awesome, I love that. Okay, so embedded finance, you gave a lot of the examples just now, buy now, pay later, and things like that. Obviously, Shopify is a really prominent example of integrating embedded finance into the platform. What areas, if any, are really attracting attention or investment for the future?
Capital's a big one. Thanks to many people in this room, we have this huge opportunity to give capital and cash advances and loans to small businesses. And I'm not trying to be pejorative. What I mean by that is most banks, most finance institutions don't lend money to small businesses. Why? You have to underwrite that. And for the most part, the underwriting decisions you were able to make are based on something in the neighborhood of 5 to 8 variables: beacon score, credit score, transaction history, whatever the inputs of the underwriting decision might be. We have way more than that. We can see exactly when they're logging in. We can see their traffic. We can see their returns. We can see the quality of their traffic. So why is that important? Well, that puts us in a unique position to do something that otherwise most other partners to these businesses could not do. And when you combine, we have about $5 billion of cash on our balance sheet. When you combine the cash we have on our balance sheet plus our ability to make instant underwriting decisions, we end up with an opportunity to give these millions of people that use Shopify money, and they use that money for one of two things. They buy inventory and they buy marketing with that, which means that they grow their business. And our ability to actually get repaid is really high because we're their partners on the payment side too. So that's a really important one. But generally, the way we think about embedded finance or any type of what we call merchant solution is that, okay, pretend for a second that we are not a platform. Pretend for a second that Shopify is a retailer, one single retailer. If we were a single retailer, we would be the second largest online retailer in America. The first would be Amazon. The second would be Shopify. Somewhere far down the list would be Walmart.com and Apple and Target and Home Depot and all these companies. Why does that matter? Well, I mean, it's a nice flex at a conference like this, but that's not the reason why it matters. The reason it matters is because when we go to negotiate on pricing for shipping or payments or capital rates or anything for that matter, we're negotiating as if we're the second largest retailer in America. And because of that, we're able to get these massive economies of scale, which we then disseminate to all the people that use Shopify. So that's how we think about these embedded services, which is that what are the things that only we can do because of our scale and size? We're about 11% of all U.S. e-commerce today flows through Shopify. It's a little bit bigger in other countries, a little bit smaller in other countries, but 11%. We are the second largest checkout on the internet, other than Amazon, ex-China. So the reason that matters is because if we can get massive economies of scale and we can give it to small businesses, it means we give them an unfair advantage fundamentally when we give them a merchant solution, because we're giving them the thing that Walmart was getting at the pricing Walmart was getting. That, I mean, I think a lot of software companies talk about like leveling the playing field and, you know, helping small. That is fundamentally leveling the playing field. When you give a small business the same tools that only traditionally large companies were able to achieve and have, that's how you create a company started in 2016 at their mom's kitchen table that in 2024 is doing $1 billion in revenue. That's the only reason that happens. Technology and massive economies of scale. We've never seen that velocity, and we don't take credit for it. We simply enable them to be able to do that.
Awesome. And using the data that you have on the platform, I guess, because the Logic just wrote an article about this today and how Shopify actually has like loan loss provisions like banks. Yours are lower, presumably, right?
Presumably.
Okay. Okay, potential, so just I guess a follow-on to that, you announced a partnership with Roblox. Really exciting.
That's exciting for me.
My son loves Roblox.
If you have kids, it's amazing. Yeah. If you don't have kids, it's a little weird, but yeah.
And you talked about it having the ability to shape the future of what you call immersive commerce. Yep. Can you elaborate on that space and how you see it evolving over time?
Yeah. The most controversial thing that I ever say, it seems, I don't know why it's controversial, but at least the way that when I read about it in the media the next day, is when I say that I don't believe the future of retail is going to be online. Like, how could the president of Shopify believe that the future of retail is not online? So let me be very clear, because there are journalists in the room. I believe the future of retail is going to be on every single surface area and every single place where consumers spend their time. So there are right now, I think the number is, there are 80 million daily actives on Roblox. 80 million, okay? They engage with brands in Roblox, they engage with creators, they engage with Mr. Beast type people, entrepreneurs. So embedding commerce, embedding a checkout into Roblox means now if you are a brand, let's say you're James Purse, and you want to sell t-shirts to the consumer that's spending their time in Roblox, now you can do so. Historically, you could not. It's the same reason why we have a partnership with Target. Now you can actually buy from Shopify merchants on Target's website. It's the same reason why 2 weeks ago we announced a deal with YouTube, where, think about this, if you're watching a YouTube video, and it's a cooking show, and let's say that particular YouTube content creator is cooking with Hexclad or Our Place, which are very famous direct-to-consumer brands in cookingware. Historically, if you wanted to buy that, you go to a different tab in your browser, you type in Hexclad or Our Place or whatever, and you go and buy it. Now, watching the video, without stopping the video, you can actually buy the product that you see in the video. That is immersive commerce. It means that commerce happens wherever you as the consumer decide. Now, if you are, I had this conversation with great Canadian entrepreneur Larry Rosen, who's the CEO of Harry Rosen. His dad was the founder. If you are Harry Rosen, the best surface area for your products is the physical store. Because the people that buy from Harry Rosen like the in-store experience. They like to get the coffee and talk to they're always so well dressed there. I always walk in there and think that they're gonna ask me where my father is or something. But that is the right way because they have empathy for who's purchasing. But if you are selling figs, which are hospital scrubs, really beautiful hospital scrubs, it's probably not where nurses and frontline workers are purchasing your hospital scrubs. So the idea that there's online retail and offline retail and they compete with each other and they're different, I think is not correct. I think the right way to think about the future of retail is retail happens based on consumer choice and it should be everywhere. This is a bit of a mouthful, but there is a Shopify integration for Spotify. So if you are an artist, if you are, let's say you're Rihanna. Rihanna has Fenty Beauty, which has made her a billionaire, powered by Shopify. Or Selena Gomez, I read on Sunday, she just became a billionaire because of her cosmetics company. She started a cosmetics company, jeez. But if you are these artists that also have incredible brands and products, and you have an artist page in Spotify, embed your products right there, seems like a no-brainer now you can do that. And so more and more what you're seeing from us is less about Shopify being the e-commerce company and more about us being the commerce company that powers commerce on every surface area on the planet.
I love that. I've actually been waiting for that to happen on TV. So you watch Gossip Girl and you see a blazer.
Totally.
And it's the
fact that it doesn't is insane, right? So
is that next?
I was watching the U.S. Open, for example, and obviously in the U.S. Open, obviously everyone's dressed nicely, but you see these incredible sneakers and these really cool outfits and all this. The fact that there's not a QR code on the bottom left corner of the US Open that you cannot, remember, with our phones now, you don't need an app for a QR code. The actual camera has embedded QR technology. It's literally natively integrated into all of our phones. The fact that I can't look that up and see everything that someone's wearing and direct click and then have direct attribution to know that the US Open actually should take an affiliate fee from that. That is insane. That is a missed opportunity. So it's not there yet, but I suspect it will be there very soon, and I hope Shopify powers that.
Awesome. Okay, so wouldn't be a conference if we didn't talk about AI.
Of course.
What are your views on the trajectory of AI in business, and if you want to go there, on humanity?
Yeah. I don't want to go there. I don't have to. It's a fintech conference. The other AI conference is down the street. I have a really great mentor of mine. Show of hands, how many of you are from Montreal in the room? Okay, great, so you'll know him. So one of my best mentors and someone that is dear advisor to me and a friend is Aldo Bensadoun, founder of Aldo Shoes. One of the great Canadian entrepreneurs who's built a multi-billion-dollar company, came to Canada not even speaking English or French, and learned the language and built this incredible business. Aldo and I gave a talk recently at the Aldo School of Retail at McGill, and someone asked Aldo, Aldo is 83 years old, just to put in the context, said, Aldo, what do you think about AI? And everyone kind of giggled and stuff. And Aldo, because he's him and he's incredible, he said, well, AI is just like having a best friend that knows everything. That's perfect. That's exactly the way to think about it. Aldo Benson, 83 years old, who doesn't know much about Ruby on Rails and doesn't know much about large language models or about Perplexity versus OpenAI and what's happening inside of Cohere. He immediately understood, I mean, this is why he's a genius, he understood exactly what it is. So the reason I mentioned that story, that anecdote to start with, is because I think that's the right way to think about AI, which is on a practical basis. The person using the AI to solve a problem, I don't know if I can swear here, but I will anyways, does not give a shit about the size of the large language model. Who cares if it's, 5 billion inputs or it's 10 billion? That does not matter. It matters, am I getting the best answer I can possibly can? So we use AI two ways inside of Shopify, and both very practically. The first way is from the merchant perspective. You may be the greatest glass blower, make beautiful glasses in your workshop, but you may not be very good at writing product descriptions. And writing very good, highly converting, highly descriptive product descriptions really, really matters in the world of e-com and non-e-com. I mean, it used to be called merchandising. Now, simply by uploading a photo on Shopify and putting in a couple key terms, glass, price point, you can use what's called Shopify Magic, and we will write you a product description. Another example is, back to the person blowing glass, making these lovely glasses, you may be okay at taking a photo of the glass, but are you really good at taking amazing product photography? I mean, at Aldo's office, he probably has a team of 20 people. My friend Rami is the CEO and founder of a company called Essence here in Montreal. If you ever go to Essence, you see the product photography on the website. It is unbelievable. Well, most people cannot do what Essence does. You agree? Okay, it's beautiful, right? The way it rotates, and it's just everything, like you want to buy everything, even though it's like some weird trench coat you're never gonna wear. You're like, it's gonna look great on me. Because they understand how to make it look good on a white background page. You don't have to take great product photography anymore on Shopify. Simply upload your image and we will give you 5 or 6 different versions of the greatest product photography based on what you've uploaded. So those are ways that we think we can help merchants. And on Shopify's side, we use it 2 ways. One is, we have this concept in our support organization called high quality conversation versus low quality conversation. If you call Shopify support and you ask them to configure your CNAME, because you bought a new domain name, that is a low quality conversation. Doesn't mean it's a bad conversation, but a human being is not going to do it better than AI or an AI agent would. In fact, an AI agent will be far less verbose and far more specific. So what we've done is we basically have created these AI agents across our support organization, not because we want to get rid of our support people, just the opposite. We want our support people, the actual human beings, having higher quality conversations like, I need to find a new channel for my business, or how come I'm not selling enough, or what's an interesting, why is this product selling and this product is not selling? Those are high quality conversations. Low quality conversation is, I forgot my password, I'm locked out of my Shopify account. So we're using AI internally to optimize, not necessarily to supplement, but to optimize things. So when you do speak to a human, the quality of discourse and conversation is incredibly high. And we are probably less hand-wavy. One of the criticisms I got after the last earnings call was, I think I spent 8 minutes talking about AI, and I think Mark Benioff spent 30 minutes talking about AI, and why didn't I spend more time talking about AI? We are not hand-wavy about AI, because actually, it's not a hand-wavy thing, it's a practical thing. Can you use this tool to make your life better as a consumer, as a merchant? If you guys want to try something really neat tonight, don't do this now, please, because it'll be distracting for me, but go check out simple website, shop.ai. That's the website, very simple. If you go to shop.ai, which is now, it's based on the Shop app, which is our consumer shopping app, but you can also do it on a browser. You can type in something like this. This weekend, I'm going to have a barbecue for my daughter, Bailey. She's 8 years old. She's obsessed with rainbows and unicorns. True story. I have a budget of $500, and I need the product shipped to me before Saturday. Please give me everything I need for this barbecue.
Oh, man.
And shop.ai will go ahead and it'll look through about 290, I think the number is 295 million SKUs, and will select all these SKUs in your price point on brand that will be delivered to you on schedule. That is a step function. That is the equivalent, I hope Larry Rosen sees this, that's the equivalent of going into Harry Rosen and saying, I have a wedding this weekend, I have no idea what the fuck to wear. That's the version of that with AI. And I think that's where it becomes really practical. And so that's how we use it.
I love that. I'm going to be on there shopping for rainbows and unicorns probably later today. Actually reminds me, probably about 5 years ago, we had someone come speak to us about AI at Deloitte, and they talked about the future of AI. A bit of a different use case than shop.ai, but he said Amazon's collecting so much information about you that in 5-10 years from now, you no longer have to order. They're just going to drop off what they think that you need, and you just leave whatever you don't want back on your doorstep.
That could be really embarrassing too.
Yeah, it could be. But anyway,
your wife's like, you have some explaining to do.
That's good. Okay, so we're going to shift a bit to the Canadian innovation landscape, a topic I know you're very passionate about.
Yeah, that's the 600-pound beaver in the room, I guess.
Well, you just did a podcast with BetaKit. It was released a couple days ago. I don't know when you did it. If you guys haven't listened to it, you really should. But maybe we'll treetop some of the nuggets here today. Maybe let's start with, how have you and Shopify really taken advantage of what are the unique opportunities within the Canadian innovation landscape?
So we built Shopify effectively out of Ottawa for the first, 12 or 15 years. I don't know if you've been to Ottawa in February. It ain't great. I was born in Montreal, grew up in South Florida, so I consider myself a South Florida kid. And Ottawa in February is a real challenge. So they're, trying to hire a CFO from New York City, from one of the big investment banks, and move them to Ottawa in February is a challenge. The ecosystem of Canada, as a startup entrepreneur, for the founders in the room, you meet a lot of great founders here in Canada, very smart, very talented, but you hear a lot of stories of acquisition. And in many ways, one of the themes of most Canadian startups and most Canadian technology companies is that, this is not my term, but I believe this is true, is that we are an ecosystem of acquirees, not acquirers. And as an angel investor, it's pretty good. But as a proud Canadian entrepreneur that, I hope has built one of Canada's great technology companies with Shopify, that makes me incredibly sad. But there is incredible advantages here. One advantage is, if you look at average tenure of a Silicon Valley company for an engineer or a VP of marketing or growth, relative to the average tenure of a Shopify leader, it's miles apart. And I think one of the great parts of having longer tenured people, specifically people that are exceptional, is that they have deep context. And with deep context, they can make better decisions much, much faster. So one of the major advantages is that. That's first. The second thing is, we are not competing with every single technology company in the Valley for talent. We are competing with them to some extent, but generally, a lot of people that come out of the best Canadian universities, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them want to stay in Canada. And there is something to be said about being the best employer in your region. Even if that region is Ottawa, being the best place to work in Ottawa means you get incredible people. I also believe that the business model of Shopify is very much, we are not a consumer brand. We are, most of you that are buying stuff online, maybe now you see with Shop Pay from time to time, but generally, if you're buying something on the internet and it's not on Amazon and it's a great experience, it's probably powered by Shopify. And you have no idea. We like that. That is very much that aligns with the Canadian sensibility, which is that we make others look good. And I mean that genuinely. I think actually that has helped us remain behind the scenes, and it has helped us become a real platform. I also think that objectively, and if you do an apples to apples comparison of talent, we have some of the most talented people coming out of our schools, coming out of our cities in Canada than you do anywhere else. And so I think whether you're building a company in Ottawa or you're building a company in Trois-Rivières, which is a place I recently visited to meet some technology companies, or you're building in Toronto or Calgary, if you are the best place to work in that area, you will get incredible talent. If we went to the Valley, which some venture capitalists want us to do back in 2010 when we raised our Series A, we probably would never have been the best place to work, because no matter how great Shopify might be, there's behemoths there, and they have like 1,000 chefs working for them, and like you can have, I don't know, all types of. So I think there is a real advantage of building here. I think there's a real advantage of the loyalty you get here. I think the quality of talent you get here is really fantastic. And for us, the one major downside is moving people to Ottawa in February, and post-pandemic, we are now a work from anywhere company. I was able to move to Montreal. I actually disclosed this on stage here 2 years ago that I was moving. It's pretty much my 1-year anniversary since I moved to Montreal. Montreal is by far my most favorite city on the planet, and I couldn't be happier to live here. But I live here now because I can live anywhere I want. And I can run the business here, and Toby's in Toronto, and our CFO, Jeff Hoffmeister from Morgan Stanley, is in New York, and our GC who came out of the White House is in DC, and our head of sales is in Texas. So we were able to sort of redesign and re-architect the company around this work from anywhere type of model so that there's less of that downside and more upsides. I sort of mentioned the 600-pound beaver in the room because I think that we don't have that many public companies here. We don't have that many HQ companies here. We have a lot of branch offices here. And that's the 600-pound beaver elephant in the room that I think we all sort of know but don't really talk about very much. I think we need more headquartered companies here. It is flattering to hear we're going to build the next Shopify of whatever. But go and do it. I want more IPOs. When we did the IPO roadshow, we've been public for almost 10 years, 9.5 years. We did 93 meetings at the roadshow, and every second or third meeting, we say, "Oh, we're from Canada," and say, "Oh, that's great." The last company that came through for the IPO roadshow from Canada was Nortel and then RIM, and they'd make a joke about how well those companies fared long term. That sucks. That totally sucks. That is beneath us. That is not at the level of quality or ambition that we should have. That is not who we are. We are incredibly smart, talented, ambitious people. And I think actually one major advantage we have is we don't have the quantity of people. And because of that, we have these incredibly deep relationships that in a given day, I get to talk to Aldo, and I get to talk to Danny Reese from Canada Goose. Dax from Lightspeed is a quasi-competitor. I don't care. I want Dax to do great. He wants me to do great. We've actually, because we don't have the quantity of people that they have in the US, we've created a community that we are always there to help each other. And I wrote a bunch of notes post-IPO, and I gave those, this is like my inside notes of what I learned on the IPO roadshow and everything I wish I would have known before the roadshow. And I gave that IPO cheat sheet out to literally anybody that would ask for it across Canada, including companies that were in my space. Because I think that this is one of those if we have more momentum and more Canadian tech companies see other people going public and building large, long-term, 100-year HQ companies, it'll happen, and eventually you get this flywheel effect of it. Now, I get the equity markets or the capital markets right now are not necessarily, it might not be the right time to go public. But I also think, back to that 600-pound whatever, there's a lot of public companies that are now going private here because either the public markets don't understand them. That's not the direction we should go. It doesn't mean that every company should go public, but what being a publicly traded company does is it allows you to be independent for longer. It allows you to raise money faster. We've had fundraising where we've raised $1 billion in a matter of an hour and a half because we're publicly traded. There are a lot of advantages to that. It means that I can have investors all over the world. And so ultimately, my hope, and I'm not just putting this on all of you, I'm taking this as my own responsibility. My responsibility, and I think all of our responsibility, is to create more large-scale headquartered companies here that don't want to be the best company in Canada. We just want to be the best company anywhere based in Canada. Shopify should be, if we work hard and we're smart, we stay focused, we should be the most important company in commerce and retail over the next many decades. And we're going to do that from Canada. That doesn't mean our ambitions are limited to a Canadian geography. It means that we like living here, but we can sell to a global audience.
I was going to take the bait and play devil's advocate, but we are short on time.
I ran the clock out for you. You can't do it.
I'm going to open it up to some questions from the audience, see if anybody has any. If not, I can do that, or we can jump to another topic. Anybody? Don't be shy.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay.
If you think of a question, just raise your hand.
Okay, so I will play devil's advocate on that for just a moment. I agree with everything you said, by the way, but we just did a study at Deloitte Ventures, and it looked at Canadian corporates with over $1 billion in revenue and how many of them invest in startups. And it showed that 6% of Canadian corporates do that, contrasted with 40% in the US. And while, putting capital into companies is not the only thing, companies need support. They need their, first reference site. They need clients, et cetera. And we hear from startups often that Canadian companies are closing the door on them and they have to go to the US to find their customers. I know you disagree with this. Share your thoughts, why you think that is, or whether you disagree with it, and is it a cultural thing?
Whether it's getting your first set of customers, or whether it's fundraising, or whether it's finding great people to come work at your companies, I don't know why you're limiting yourself to Canada. We have some Canadian VCs as part of the Shopify story. In fact, famously, John Phillips, our original angel investor, who's now one of the wealthiest Canadians, he's a billionaire today because of that investment in Shopify that he made back in 2008. Our first 3 VCs were American VCs. Why? Because they were the right VCs for us. Not because they were American or Canadian. It was because Bessemer knew more about SaaS businesses than anybody else. They wrote a white paper called The 10 Laws of SaaS, which we use as our Bible. FirstMark had a lot of experience with direct-to-consumer brands, and so did Felicis. And so we never limited ourselves to, and maybe this is part, I mentioned earlier, I grew up in the US, I grew up in Florida, Toby grew up in Germany. Partially, maybe because we didn't grow up here, we didn't spend our entire lives in Canada, we never limited ourselves to Canadian VCs, Canadian investors, Canadian customers. Even in terms of the IPO, it was obvious when we went public it was going to be a dual listing. Why? Because there's more money on the New York Stock Exchange, but we also want to be listed on the TSX because we're a proud Canadian company. I don't think you have to necessarily, I don't think, if the Canadian corporates don't invest as much as they should, okay, the Americans do. Today, certainly today, but I think even 10 years ago, in 2014, business is geographically agnostic. Nobody cares about where you're based. That is the case today. That was the case 10 years ago. Maybe 30 years ago, that was different. And maybe if you're taking money from a Canadian pension fund, there are certain geographic limitations. I appreciate that. But my wife and I are LPs in pretty much every major Silicon Valley venture capital firm, from Andreessen to Benchmark to Sequoia. And I get these reports from these great VCs telling us where they're investing. They're not limiting themselves to the US. They're investing everywhere because their job is to get the best return on that investment, on that capital. And I think that's a much better way to think about it. I do think, though, that one thing you're sort of hinting at is that we got to support our own way more. We have to give ourselves a little bit of an unfair advantage in the same way that in Silicon Valley, they give themselves an unfair advantage. When someone wants to leave a particular big company in Silicon Valley and there's a small startup that may be that may be the right place for that person to land in, there's a conversation that happens. I do think we're getting better at that. I have no idea about the Canadian corporates, and so I won't pretend that I do. But certainly from our perspective, Shopify is a venture arm. We've invested in dozens and dozens of companies. In some cases, like Klaviyo, because we think, or Stripe, we think they're amazing companies. and we want to participate in their runway. We want to use their product. We want to integrate them into our ecosystem. In other cases, we just love the technology so much that we want to vote with our own wallets that we want to support these companies going forward. If we can get to a point that we can think of Canada as, and I believe this. I mean, like I have evidence of it because I live in Montreal. I believe the best place for me to live and raise my children and live with my wife is right here. But I believe Shopify can be a global company, even though I'm here. And I think that perspective of live here, but work everywhere, I think that's the right, for me at least, I believe that to be the right way to think about all of your businesses too.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to shift to maybe something a little bit more personal.
Yeah.
Your history, obviously, clearly entrepreneurial. You were a DJ at, I think it was 13, T-shirt business at 17, first merchants
in Chabanel.
on
My T-shirt business was based in Chabanel, about 5 kilometers from here.
For one of the first merchants on Shopify, you joined Shopify in 2010 as the chief platform officer, and then obviously you were able to add value in a bunch of different areas and landed yourself the presidency. So I guess I'd like to understand your views on the topic du jour, which is founder's mode. You alluded to that earlier. And I mean, my hunch is that you obviously live and breathe that at Shopify, but I'm curious as to how your leadership style might have changed or evolved as your role within the company has changed and evolved.
Show of hands, how many of you know what we're talking about when it comes to founder's mode? Like, you've heard it, you've read the blog post. Okay, so most people have not, so let me explain it. Brian Chesky gave a keynote 10 days ago at Y Combinator that he titled Founders Mode. And then a day later, Paul Graham, who created Y Combinator, wrote a blog post, which is now very famous. It went viral. But effectively, what Founders Mode means is that it's permission for leadership, for founders, and actually non-founders. Fiji Sima, who's on my board, she's the CEO of Instacart, she actually wrote an article the day after that saying, Founders Mode is also for non-founders. But it's permission to get into the details. And effectively, it's the opposite of what Paul Graham would say is manager's mode. Manager's mode, in his definition, in his nomenclature, or his articulation of it, is that you hire the best people and you get out of their way. You let them do their thing. And if you don't, and if you actually get into the details, there's sort of this pejorative term called micromanagement, which is really bad, or apparently really bad. And so for a lot of us, Shopify is my first real job, just to say the thing. I mean, I've been at it for a long time. I've had companies, but never ran a public company before. So I'm learning as I go. And I have mentors, and I read books, and I have coaches. And I have found that a lot of the advice that I get, and I'm sure a lot of you get, is hire the best people, get out of their way. Don't micromanage them. Let them do their thing. I believe that is a failed experiment for most companies. I believe the best companies that exist today, from technology companies to media companies to oil and gas companies and infrastructure companies, they get into the details. They know more about the business than almost anyone else, and they're at the top of the business. And again, you can look at Shopify, you can look at Tesla, or you could look at, I've recently been able to spend time with Michael Sabia at Hydro-Quebec. Michael Sabia knows so much about Hydro-Quebec. He understands the technology, the infrastructure, the cost base. He understands everything about that business. It is remarkable what Sabia knows about Hydro-Quebec. By the way, he also knew that when he was running BCE. That is founder mode. He wasn't the founder of Hydro-Quebec, but Sabia is running this thing in founders mode. And I think that this blog post and this new nomenclature gave us this term to say, I'm not micromanaging you, I'm in founders mode. And that's not a permission to be a jerk, but it is something that I think is very helpful. And Shopify, the reason it wasn't like this big aha epiphany moment for us is we've been doing it. Toby still writes code. I did 3 sales calls today with very large merchants that I want to migrate to Shopify. I did those calls myself, not with another sales rep. It was me on the call with the CTO of one of the largest retailers in the world. And when he asked me about API calls or checkout limits or how to do flash sales from a throttle perspective, I can answer those questions. I better be able to answer those questions because otherwise I don't have a right to call myself the leader of Shopify. The leader of Shopify needs to know that. So I love that Chesky and Paul Graham gave this new piece of nomenclature. I hope it's not used to be a jerk, but I think the best leaders, we have 19 seconds, so let me close where I started. Aldo Bensadoun knows more about shoes than anybody that works at Aldo. 83 years old, you talk to him about soles, stitching. Aldo was the guy that literally helped start Skechers. The reason it's called Skechers is because this founder of Skechers sketched out the first Skechers shoe in front of Aldo, and he said, don't do it this way, do it that way. That created Skechers. He did the same thing by bringing Doc Marten to the world. Doc Marten was in a small little town in the UK. He saw the Doc Marten shoe and said, I can do something with that. Founder mode is just how you do anything is how you do everything. Founder mode is a very intentional way to run your business, to run your department, to run your organization, and I think it leads to far better results. I'm excited that there's a name for it now.
Awesome. Someone told me before that I'm the master of the time. I know that says 0, but I'm going to do this last bit for 1 second.
Sure.
You're very
the master
open.
of time. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, right. So, you're pretty open about yourself online, and so I created this little segment where we're going to do a quick rapid fire to hopefully try and learn something new about you. Okay? And so it's rapid. What's your favorite mobile app?
Perplexity. Do you guys know? Anyone know Perplexity?
Mine too. It's actually mine too.
It's the best.
Yeah.
I use Perplexity. It's just have it on your phone. I think it's like $10 or something like that. But whether it's you want to figure out what to cook for dinner tonight, or you want to do some research on the person sitting next to you and all you know is their name, you're like looking over, who is that person? It is the best. I think it's the best. Sorry.
Okay, rapid fire.
Yeah, sorry, rapid fire.
What's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie, Glengarry Glen Ross, I guess.
Okay.
I old school, but
all
I'm
right.
old soul. Yeah.
Dinner for breakfast or breakfast for dinner?
I don't eat breakfast, so no, none of those.
Okay, and then maybe final one. If you could instantly become an expert in anything or attain a superpower, what would it be?
Parenting.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, on that note, thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.